Suppose I want to make a brush with this image. First, I'll have to bring this image inside Photoshop. So this is a blue background that I have created. And on top of that, we have our image. This is just an empty layer which we are going to use later. At this point, if you want to get a brush out of this image, you simply go to Edit and then define Brush Preset. Let's name the brush anything. I'm going to name it floral_1 and then hit OK. But where is this brush saved? If we go to brushes over here, we can find the floral brush that we just created. This is currently selected. You can see the blue box around it. So now we no longer need this image. Therefore, I can delete this image altogether, or let's say I hide it for now. I'm going to select the empty layer and turn it on because this is where I want to test the brush. The brush tool is already selected. This is the color we are using, and now it's time to check the brush. So as I hover the mouse, we get the outline of this massive brush. I'm going to click and it paints. We can of course adjust the size of the brush by tapping the left or right square bracket on the keyboard. This is already massive. I'm going to reduce it. So this is the smaller version of the brush. We can paint like this or that. But what if I don't want to get this nasty border of the image in the brush? And push it even more, what if I don't want all these 3 foliages? Maybe I want to make a brush out of just this one. For that, we can select any of the selection tools from here. I'll select the rectangular marquee tool. We'll have to make a selection around this. Then we go to Edit and define Brush Preset. I'm going to name it floral_2. We don't need the selection anymore, so deselect with Ctrl+D. We go to brushes, and here's a brush. I'm going to hide this image now, we don't need it, and then select the empty layer. So this is the outline of our brush with a single foliage. I'm going to click and paint. Let's reduce the brush size. Here we go. Now so far we were using a high resolution image to create our custom brush. This image that we were using is 1920 pixels by 1080 pixels. This foliage alone is 1058 pixels by 860 pixels. So what I'll do is I'll scale it down. The resolution now is 163 by 132. Reduce it some more. Like this is now is 80 by 65 pixels. Now I'm gonna hit enter. Now at this point, if I don't make any kind of selection around the foliage, Photoshop is gonna assume that we want the artboard border to appear in the brush outline preview, something like we had before. Although it doesn't cause any harm, it is quite distracting. So to avoid that, we should have a selection. As long as there is no other design except this foliage, we can have a selection like this, or even this. But for this tutorial's sake, I'm going to make a small selection. Off to Edit, define Brush Preset. I'll name it floral_small and then OK. Deselect the selection, hide the image, and then select the empty layer. So when I hover the mouse, you can see how small it is. And not only that, we can see no outline of the artboard. We can paint with our small brush. You can reduce the size of the brush if you want, but I'm going to increase it to show you something. Now if I paint with this, watch what happens. You can see that the paint is no longer high resolution. That's because we created the brush with a very low resolution image. Next, I'm going to talk about the theory behind the creation of custom brushes. I made this in Photoshop. This is pure black, this is 50% gray, and this gray is even lighter. Last we have white, and I've outlined it in black. The surrounding, as you can notice, is also white. But what's the point of all this? I'm going to make a brush out of this image. And let's say I'll be using pink for the sake of this example. This black is going to give me a solid opaque pink. This 50% gray will give me a pink which has an opacity of 50. This lighter gray will give me a paint opacity which is lower than 50. And finally this one, the black ring, will give a full solid opacity of 100 and the white will make the paint transparent. Let's test it out. You can use the marquee tool, but just for the sake of it, I'm going to use the magic wand tool to make the selection. First, I'm going to click and select this white background here. And then if I inverse the selection, this will be selected, right? So let's do that. I'm going to go to select and then inverse. To create the brush, we go to edit and then define brush preset. I'll name it concept. Deselect the selection. Let's locate the brush. And here we have it. I want to paint on this empty layer, so I'll select it. And since we don't need this image anymore, I'm going to hide it. Let's also hide the background for now. We have a brush tool selected. This pink is our color. And so when I hover the mouse, this is our brush outline. I'm going to click. And now we can refer to the source image. So as I've mentioned before, black is giving us a full solid opaque pink with an opacity of 100%. 50% gray is giving us a pink color which has an opacity of 50%. So since this is semi-transparent now, we can see the checkered boxes through it. Similarly, with the lighter gray, we have even less opacity. And last but not the least, for the black border, we have a solid opaque pink with a full opacity of 100%. The white inside makes the pink paint totally transparent with an opacity of 0%. Let me quickly turn on the blue background layer. And this is how it looks. Here we cannot see the blue background at all. The pink hides it completely. Here we can see a little of the background through the paint. Here even more. Here, since the stroke is opaque, we cannot see the background at all. And this part is totally transparent, so we see the entire blue background just fine. But why is it that I'm only using grayscale images or black and white to make custom brushes? There are two reasons. There's no harm in using colored images to make custom brushes. But the thing is, Photoshop doesn't use the color informations to make the brushes. So I use it unnecessarily. What Photoshop essentially looks for is the lightness value. Not the brightness value, mind you, the lightness value. But for the human eye, it's very difficult to perceive the correct darkness or lightness of a color. For example, which of these two colors do you think is lighter? For what I think I see is this is lighter. I want to verify this. I'll alt click and sample this one, then click on foreground color. Its lightness value is 23. Now since I deem this color to be darker than this one, its lightness value should be lower than this one, right? Let's find out. But surprisingly, this is also 23. It means both the colors are equally dark or equally light. So with this present situation, if I make a brush, what will happen? We are going to find out. First, we make a selection. We go to Edit and define brush preset. I'll name it original underscore image. Hit enter and deselect the selection. We'll find our brush here. You know the drill. We select the empty layer to draw. Turn it on. We don't need this image anymore. And last, I'll switch on the background layer. The brush tool is selected and blue is my foreground color. So now when I hover the mouse, we get our brush outline. I'll click once. And now you can clearly see what I meant earlier. Since these two blocks had the same tonal lightness, they have the same color opacity here. Let me quickly turn off the background layer so you can get a better look. So these two blocks have the exact same transparencies despite what we thought they would have. And this is exactly why we should get rid of the color while making custom brushes. But how do we get rid of the color and convert the image to grayscale? Well, there are a couple of ways to do that. Select the image layer and then we go to Layer Adjustments. Here we'll have to select black and white. And there you go. But this is not the correct tonal representation of the color. Why do I say so? Because from our earlier example, we saw that these two blocks have the same lightness value, right? So with that logic, they should have got the same tonal values, but they don't. You can obviously go with this black and white option if you are going after this kind of tonal value. I'm gonna undo this and show you the other method with which you can have a grayscale. For that, we select the image layer, go to Image, Adjustments, and desaturate. This also gives a wrong representation of the tone, so I won't be using it. The right way would be to open the image in Greyscale mode. So I'm going to create a new document, go to File, New, Create. Next we'll have to bring the image here. So let's go to the first document, select and copy the image layer, head back to the second document, and then paste it in the Layers panel. Now to convert this document into a Greyscale mode, we go to Image, Mode, and then Greyscale. Don't worry about these for now, just don't flatten. Then Discard, and there we have it, the unadulterated, correct representation of the tone. You can see for yourself that these two blocks have the same tonal value. Now all that is left to be done is to copy this black and white image layer, go to the first document, and paste it in the Layers panel. We don't need this color image anymore, so I'll hide it. I'll then make a selection, go to Edit, and define brush preset. I'll call it Greyscale. OK that. Deselect this. And if we go here, this is our brush. I'm going to select the empty layer where we are going to paint. We don't need this reference anymore, so I'll hide it. And I'll turn on the white background layer. Blue is the color of my choice. And now if I hover the mouse, let's see what we get. We get the outline of the brush, that's cool. And when I click and paint, we get the true representation of the tones. Let me quickly hide the background layer so you can see the opacities clearly. I have this color image of an actual acrylic paint, and I'll use this to explain color mode and Greyscale mode of custom brushes side by side. First, I'm going to use this color image to create a custom brush. So I'll click on the marquee tool, make a selection of the acrylic, edit, define brush preset. I'll name it with_color, hit OK, deselect the selection, and we have our brush here. I'll select the empty layer and turn it on. We don't need this image anymore, so I'll hide it. And I'll turn on this background layer, which is half blue and half white. This time I've green as my foreground color. So let's go and bring our brush. This is our brush, and I'll paint. And then on the white background. I'll hide the background layer so you can take a look at the opacity. I'm going to hide these two for now so that I can show you the Greyscale mode. I'll need this image again. And as I've already taught you before, we need to select and copy this image layer. Go to a new document which I've already created. And I'll paste the copied image in the Layers panel. Here's our image. And now I'll need to change the mode to Greyscale. So we go to Image, Mode, and then Greyscale. Ignore these for now, just hit Don't Flatten and also Discard. Now all we need to do is copy this Greyscale image, so Ctrl+C, and now we can head back to our previous document. To paste the black and white image, Ctrl+V on the Layers panel. Now we'll have to make our usual selection. I'll go to Edit and define brush preset. This time I'll name it no_color. Hit OK, deselect the selection. I'll hide the references, we don't need these anymore. Activate the drawing layer and the background. So now we'll compare the Greyscale brush. I'll click and paint on the blue background and then on the white. So you can see that the color custom brushes and the Greyscale custom brushes are both identical, right? Now there's no hard and fast rule that you must use this Greyscale image to create custom brushes. But if you ask me, this should be a good starting point. You can always go ahead and apply adjustments to play with its tonal value. For example, I'll use brightness and contrast. No effect yet. We'll have to double click here to open the adjustment settings. I'm going to ramp up the brightness. Now we follow the same process. We make a selection around it. Go to Edit and define brush preset. Let's call it Adjustments. We know we'll have to deselect the selection. And this is our brush. Since we don't need these anymore, I'll hide them. Activate the drawing layer and the background. Let's take our brush and paint. so you can always go for the effect you want. Here's a look without the background, with the background. Next, we're going to learn how to create interesting custom brush presets. We have this reference watercolor image. I'm going to create a custom brush out of it, and just for the sake of time, I'm not going to convert it into Greyscale. So let's make a selection with the marquee tool, edit, define brush preset. Let's call it watercolor. You already know we have to deselect the selection, and here's our brush. Hide the image layer, turn on the empty layer, and the background. So this is our brush at its simplest. I'll go ahead and reduce the brush size a couple of times, and then we can draw with the brush. But this is so boring. How can we make our custom brush more interesting? For that, we'll have to go to brush settings. You can see that our custom brush is already selected, and now we are free to adjust any of these settings to make our boring custom brush more compelling. For example, under brush tip shape, I'm going to increase spacing a bit, which makes our painting look something like this. Then maybe I'll go to shape dynamics and increase size jitter. So unlike before, now the brush tips have varying size. I'm going to jack up angle jitter now to get different angles for each of the brush tips. Looks much more intriguing, doesn't it? Last, I'm going to do a bit of scattering. I'll push the scatter value up a bit. This is our brush now. Maybe add some count. So the brush tips are more populated, right? Last, I'll use transfer and mess with the opacity jitter. I'm happy with this for now, but maybe I'd like to do one more last thing. I would like to reduce the overall opacity of the brush. So I'll go to the option bar and just do that. So this was with 100% opacity and this with 35. Now suppose I want to save this preset with the exact brush settings over here and also with the settings over here. To do that, we click on this plus icon. I'll call this watercolor preset. Now if you want to keep the brush size fixed at what you have chosen here, you'll have to check this. And if you want to add the options from here, you'll have to check this. I want the 35% opacity of the brush to be reflected, so I will check this. Last but not the least, you can also include the color for the brush. I want the yellow color, so I'll check this as well. Our custom brush preset is ready. So this is our brush preset. But before I check the brush, I'll do a couple of things. I'll change the foreground color to anything other than yellow. I'll select red maybe. I'll also reset the opacity to 100. Next, I'll choose a completely different brush preset. Its brush settings are pretty much nil. So the brush preset we are on right now is as simple as that. Now can we go back to this brush preset that we just created a couple of seconds back? Will the opacity change to 35% and the color to yellow? There's only one way to find out. We go to brushes, scroll down, and select the watercolor preset. So the preset has actually recorded the options from here, and that's why the opacity is 35 and not 100. Not to mention the yellow color is obviously intact. That's alright, but does it remember all the brush settings? It does. Next, we're going to learn about these locks with regards to custom brush presets or brush presets in general. For this purpose, I've already created two brush presets. First, I'm going to check this one. Let's have a single click first, and this is how it paints. Let's quickly check the brush settings this preset is using. It is using color dynamics, so I'll click on that. It has apply per tip on and foreground background jitter at 100. And that's why we are getting this pink and yellow variation in the brush from the foreground and background color. Let's check the second brush preset that I've created. This is our brush tip, and here's the full stroke. Let's review the brush settings it has got. So it has got scattering, 169% on scatter and 4 on count. Now suppose I want the color dynamics of the first brush preset in this brush preset too. Well, you can say it's very easy. We just copy the color dynamics value from the first one and then paste it on the second. but it's gonna be very time consuming to copy the values one by one and then paste them. Here comes the use of locks. I'll show you how. I'll make sure this brush preset is selected. Go to its brush settings. We want to copy the values from color dynamics, so I'll select it. At this point, you can see that the lock is not locked. All we need to do is click on it and lock it. What did it do? It just copied all the color dynamics informations from here. Very well, let's go to our second brush preset. This was the initial brush setting of the second brush preset, just remember that. But now, if I go to brush settings, just see what has happened. All the color dynamics values have been pasted. Let's see how the brush looks for real. Not only does it have the scatter, it also has the color variations now. At this point, I should also make this clear that using the lock doesn't mess up the default brush presets, but you can see that it clearly messed up. I can very well see that the second brush preset has a scatter as well as a color dynamics. But all we need to do is just go to the brush settings and unlock the lock. Now let's go to brushes and use the brush presets again. This is our first brush preset. It only has color dynamics, right? Now let's try the second brush preset. This time we should only get a scatter, and quite rightly so. So the default brush presets are always preserved. Next I'm going to explain protect texture with regards to custom brush presets. For that I've already created 3 brush presets in advance. Let's check out this one, which is already selected. We get this kind of a brush. Let's see the settings this brush preset is made up of. So it has got a texture, which is this from here. It has a scale of 379, brightness 0, contrast -50, and so on. Now I'm going to select this brush preset, texture 1. It looks like this. It has got shape dynamics, and in shape dynamics it has got an angle jitter of 42%. Other than that, it has also got a different texture with these values. Let's check our last brush preset, this one. We'll go to its brush settings. You can see that it has only got a transfer setting with opacity jitter on it. It has got no texture. Let's try this out. You can clearly see the different opacities in the brush tips. So you can see that this brush preset has got a texture. This also has got a texture, but this brush preset has no texture. What if I want to auto paste the texture values of this brush preset on any brush preset which has got a texture? For that, first I'll have to select this brush preset. We'll go and do that. Go to its brush settings and check protect texture. This alone won't work. We also need to lock the padlock. This has essentially copied all the texture values from this brush preset. Can we paste those texture values on this brush preset? Let's select it and find out. Looks like it can, but can it also paste the texture values on this brush preset which has got no default textures? First I'll click on the brush preset from which I want the texture. Next I'll click here. You can see that it has got no effect. Next we're going to take a look at the custom brush setting option for the erodible brush tip that I skipped in the previous tutorial. I'm going to select this pencil. You'll have to use a graphic pen tablet, by the way. Let's increase its size to 100 pixels. And I'll explain myself by using erodible point as the shape. Let's take the brush on the document. It is a sharp pencil tip. And here's how we use it. Now you can see that the tip is no more sharp like before. What if I want to preserve this present unsharpened state of this pencil? We go to brush settings and then click on this plus icon. I'll name it erodible_preset. Here's our preset as usual. Select the brush preset, go back to brush settings, and then make sure custom is selected as shape. So now if I go, we have a custom brush that we wanted. It is now going to start eroding from this blunt tip. I don't know if you noticed, but it's blunter than before. And the process goes on with every use. I'm sure you can see how flat the tip is now. What if we want to go back to initial tip shape? We go to brush settings and then click on sharpen tip while custom is still selected in shape. So we got back our custom pencil tip exactly the way we saved it. And of course, the pencil tip is going to keep wearing away going forward. Want the custom pencil tip back again? Go to brush settings and then sharpen tip. So this is all I have for today. Make sure to check the other videos. I'll see you next time. Bye.